Max Rich here, and today I want to give you a quick couple of tips on how to improve your bending. It's one of the biggest problems I see with amateur guitar players, intermediate guitar players, is not getting bends properly and getting them out of tune. And so today I'm going to help you solve both of those problems. The very first thing that you have to think of when you think of bending is essentially what you're doing is compressing a string. You're taking a string and you're stretching it to a certain point and then probably at some point releasing it. Now there are a ton of different types of bends. We're not going to talk about the different types of bends. I'm going to teach you how to improve your bending from a technical perspective. And that is going to come down to two very simple things. Number one, the angle of your fingers and your fingertips in relation to the string, and two, the position of your thumb. So the very first thing that you have to think of when you think of bending is that I see this with a lot of players. They'll go to bend and they'll end up with something like this. They'll go like this. They'll do that, right? Or they'll try to bend a high note and they'll do something like this. And if you've been playing guitar or you have like developed a decent ear, you can hear that that's not in tune. And the reason most players bend out of tune is that they're not hitting the correct pitch. They're stopping below it. Very rarely do I hear students or intermediate players go past the pitch. Meaning, if let's say you're taking an A and you're bending it to a B, very rarely do players go past the B to like somewhere between B and C or even over the note C. Most of the time they're going like kind of not quite up to the B. They're not quite getting there. And that a lot of times teachers will say like, oh, just bend a little more, just kind of like give it a little more. And that's never really going to work because the student doesn't know what they're doing wrong, right? And this is what you're probably doing wrong, is you're bending with straight fingers or straight-ish fingers, right? And so like I was saying in the beginning, you're compressing a string. You're taking a string and you're yanking it in one direction or another. And when you bend with straight fingers or straight-ish fingers, right, it looks something like this. Let me see if I can reposition. It looks something like that. Like your hand is going to be looking sort of like this, right? And if I take that and I remove that, my fingers look like that, right? They're not like totally straight, but they're not curved either. They're like straight-ish, right? And so if I want to bend a string, essentially what I have to do is I have to take curved fingers, put them on the string, and then straighten them. That's going to push that string upward towards the ceiling. Now, I don't want to get too caught up into the direction that you bend your string. It doesn't matter if you push your string up towards the ceiling or pull it down towards the ground. They will end up with, sort of like opposite starting points. Like if you're taking your low E string and you're yanking it towards the ground, you have to start with a straight finger and compress your finger down into a bent position, right? But very rarely are players pulling the upper strings, the high ones, towards the ground because they're going to just come off the neck. So most players will bend the bass strings towards the ground and the high strings towards the ceiling. You essentially want to bend like towards the center of the neck. And so for this demonstration, we're talking about upper strings. And if I take my upper string, right, and I want to bend it, and I start with a curved finger. If I'm using my ring finger, right? I start with my curved finger and I want to bend it. I'm going to push it up towards the ceiling. If I start with a curved finger and I'm just going to keep going, I'm not going to try to bend in tune. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to essentially try straightening my fingers. Right? And I take that curved position and I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until my fingers are like straight or near straight. And that allows me to bend, right? Because I'm using all this compression in my fingers, kind of like a spring, and then I'm releasing the spring and straightening it. And the opposite is true too. If I take a low string and I want to bend it, I start with a straight position, and then I yank it down into a compressed spring. So if I take this, right, you can see that what I'm doing is taking a straight finger and bending it down. So the two different starting points depends on which direction you're bending. Right? You're bending towards the center of the neck. So the bass strings will start with a straight set of fingers and go into compression, and the upper strings will start with compression and go into straight fingers. And they'll look something like this up close. Okay, so the next thing that you have to sort of attempt to try to do if you're going to try to bend is you need leverage. You need something to bend against. You know, if I'm like sitting in a chair and I want to push off the wall and go that direction, I need like a wall to push off of. If I push off the air, I don't go anywhere. I need something to brace against to push myself in one direction. And it's the same thing. If I'm trying to bend a string in a direction, I need something to brace against. And you can very clearly demonstrate this by like removing your thumb entirely and try bending a string. You know, like if I take my thumb off, you know, even with compressed fingers, right? If my thumb's not on the neck at all, I don't have anything to brace off of, and I can't really straighten my fingers because the tension of the string is way more poundage than my fingers can actually move. Like I can't move the amount of poundage of pressure that the string is, or the amount of tension that the string is at with just my fingers. I need something to brace against, and that's going to be your thumb. So the second issue that players have when they bend is their thumb is usually in the wrong position. You know, I want you to go take a look at, just Google an image of Jimi Hendrix bending a string, or Joe Bonamassa, or whoever your favorite guitar player is who bends a lot, David Gilmour, somebody like this, right? Almost guaranteed, almost without failure, I can virtually guarantee this, their thumb's on top of the neck, right? It's almost never going to be behind the neck, right? It's almost always going to be on top of the neck. And this doesn't have anything to do with small hands. You know, I've taught little like 8-year-old girls how to do this with tiny little hands. So it's not got anything to do with the size of your hand. Your thumb sitting on top acts as a brace for those upper strings so that you can straighten them and push against something, right? If I'm pushing towards the ceiling, right, and I'm trying to straighten my fingers, I need to push down at the same time. And that pushing down motion comes from my thumb. So if I can get my thumb up top, then I can essentially do this. I can go like that and push into my thumb. Whereas if my thumb's not there, I don't have the pressure. I don't have anything to brace against when I'm bending. So if you're trying to improve your bends and you're trying to make sure that you can, you know, have these nice, big, effective bends, these things, you know, like that sort of a thing, right? Where you're bending in tune and you have ultimate control over the string, then you need those two components. You need to have compressed fingers going to straight, you know, or straight going to compressed if you're using the bass strings, but that's less important. And you also need the thumb sitting on top to brace against. If your thumb's in the back, you don't really have quite the same amount of leverage. The only leverage you get when your thumb is in the back is like the stickiness or like the tackiness of your skin against the back of the neck. And that's not going to be enough. That's not going to be enough pressure. You need actual, like, the meat of your thumb to at least be somewhere near the top. It doesn't have to be Hendrix style wrapped around the top, but it needs to be up top so that you can push down on the neck and push up with your fingers. Those are the two main components. There is a third element that a lot of players somehow overlook. But if you're bending, let's say, with your ring finger, you need the other two fingers, if possible, to assist that string in pushing up. What you don't want to do is you don't want to just try pushing up with the one finger that you're fretting. You want to push up with as many fingers behind that one as possible. Now, if you're bending with your index finger, you don't have any fingers behind it, right? Like if I'm bending this note, right? I don't have any other fingers behind it to help bend. If I'm bending with my middle finger, I do. I could put my index finger behind it and help push and give myself leverage. And if I'm bending with my ring finger, I have both of those fingers to help. And if I'm bending with my pinky, then I've got all my fingers to assist. Right? And then there's a lot of other like more advanced details I don't want to go into in this video with vibrato and all kinds of other stuff when you're bending. There's a separate video I'm going to do about that. But the main thing that I wanted to get across is that thumb on top for leverage, and start with compressed fingers. You have to have really, really, really compressed fingers because the distance you're going to bend that string is going to be maxed out by how straight your fingers can get. So if you're starting here, you're only going to get to there. If you're starting here, you have all the room in the world to go. So get on the fingertips, push that string up towards the ceiling, try to get straight. Now, as far as being in tune goes, that's something that's very personal, and this is why bending is such a feel-based thing, is because your guitar is set up differently than my guitar. We use different size strings, with different scale lengths, all different types of things. You have different feel in your fingers than I do. And so the distance you have to push a string up is going to be different than the distance I have to push a string up. Even on my guitar, if I want to bend a whole step down here, I'm going to have to bend a different distance than I will up here. Right? So learning your guitar and learning to feel how far you have to push that string to get in tune, that's a whole separate issue. But the actual technical element of it boils down to thumb on top, making sure that you have leverage, and compressed fingers so that you have room to straighten them. If you do those two things, your bends will improve immediately. Go try this right now, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Within an hour, you will be bending much more comfortably. And hopefully, you'll be playing a lot more cool stuff because you'll be sounding more like your favorite players. And if you enjoyed this video, please check out www.maxrichmusic.com, and you can sign up for the weekly newsletter where there's tons of tips like this, plus a whole lot more, videos, tabs, lessons, all different kinds of things. It is free, and the link is in the description down below. Also, I would very much appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button, ding that notification bell so you are aware when there are new videos coming out, and like, share, and subscribe. Spread the word, because technique is what allows you to play better. It allows you to get the music in your head out on the actual guitar. Without technique, we are essentially useless on this instrument. So that's my mission, is to help you guys get technically better, and I hope you got a little technically better today. So thanks for watching.